Imagine you are the undisputed voice of a generation. Your words don't just entertain people, they shape the philosophy of millions.
Right. They spark actual cultural movement.
Exactly. You are viewed as this towering intellect, an unshakable visionary. But then imagine taking hundreds of your most intimate, brilliant, and vulnerable poems and just, well, intentionally hiding them from the world.
Sweeping your own art right under the rug.
Yes, sweeping it under the rug. Why would a genius do that?
I mean, it forces us to reconsider basically everything we know about how masterpieces are actually created. Because we tend to view these monumental figures through the lens of their finished, polished works,
The highlight reel.
right? The highlight reel. We see the pristine marble statue, but we never really think about the chipped blocks of stone covering the dusty floor of the sculptor's studio.
Well, that dusty studio is exactly where we are heading today. We are taking a deep dive into the archives of Allama Iqbal, who is one of the most influential poet-philosophers of the 20th century.
Absolutely.
And our map for this journey is this staggering piece of scholarship called Baqiyat Iqbal. It was researched and compiled by Dr. Taqi Abedi, and the title essentially translates to the uncollected or omitted works of Iqbal.
And to really understand the weight of this book, you have to understand Iqbal's public stature at the time. I mean, he was building this grand philosophical narrative.
Focused on Kudi.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Kudi, or self-actualization. His official published works were meticulously designed to awaken a society, to push back against colonial subjugation, and just revive a dormant intellectual spirit.
It was heavy stuff. And actually picture the cover of this book for a second, because it sets the tone perfectly for what you're about to hear. It's this striking, really pensive portrait of Iqbal. He's looking downward, deeply lost in thought. And the background is this collage of scattered papers and faded Urdu calligraphy. It almost feels like you are trespassing, It visually prepares you for the fact that you aren't about to read his famous thunderous anthems. You are stepping into his private, completely unguarded workshop. And those scattered papers on the cover, they aren't just a stylistic choice. They represent the literal, physical reality of what Dr. Abedi spent, well, years of his life hunting down.
Right, because this wasn't just like opening a single desk drawer and finding a neat stack of lost poems.
Oh, not at all.
Let's get into the mechanics of that hunt, actually. The premise of Baqiyat Iqbal is basically a massive logistical puzzle. Iqbal intentionally left a huge volume of his poetry out of his canonical collections. So Dr. Abedi took on this Herculean task to trace the ghosts of these omitted works. We are talking about scouring through decades-old, crumbling issues of literary magazines.
Journals like Makhzan, which was an immensely influential Urdu literary magazine in the early 1900s.
Wow.
You really have to remember how literary culture functioned before mass media, before the internet. It was highly ephemeral.
Right.
A poet might publish this brilliant piece in a monthly periodical, and if it wasn't later anthologized in a hardcover book, it just simply vanished into the ether.
It was gone. And Dr. Abedi didn't stop at magazines either. He was digging into private diaries, tracing personal correspondence sent to Iqbal's intellectual peers, figures like the poet Jarami or the statesman Maharaja Kishan Prasad. He was actively looking for the poems Iqbal sent to friends, but deliberately hid from the public.
Exactly.
But wait, I have to stop us here for a second, because I look at this and I immediately see a serious ethical dilemma.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about it. If Iqbal, a man who clearly profoundly knew how to curate his own legacy, intentionally left these poems out of his published books, aren't we kind of violating his artistic vision by digging them up? I mean, if the architect says a room is off limits, who are we to pick the lock?
That tension is so central to archival scholarship. It's a great point. But avoiding these texts doesn't actually preserve his legacy. It artificially flattens it.
Flattens it.
Yeah, the true value of the Baqiyat is that it systematically demystifies the illusion of spontaneous genius.
Okay, but I need more than that. How does reading something a visionary deemed, not good enough or not appropriate actually demystify him without just outright disrespecting his boundaries?
Well, consider the alternative. If we only read his final canonical works, we fall for that myth that a great poet just sits under a tree, gets struck by divine inspiration, and writes a perfect philosophical treatise in one go.
Right, the lightning bolt myth.
Exactly. But the Baqiyat proves that brilliance is heavy. It's painful curation. By looking at the poems he cut, we can reverse engineer his thematic architecture.
Oh, that's interesting.
We see ideas he tested, pushed to the absolute limit, and then abandoned because they just didn't serve his ultimate public project of societal awakening.
So by seeing what he rejected, we understand the specific shape of what he was trying to build. It's like learning about the mold by looking at the cast-offs.
That is the crucial takeaway right there. It traces the evolution of his thought over decades. You're watching a master hone his craft in real time.
Deciding what ideas were too raw, maybe too fatalistic.
Yes. Or simply didn't possess the necessary philosophical rigor for the public stage.
Wow. But, if his public masterpiece required that level of ruthless self-editing, it really begs the question, how does a genius know what to cut? I mean, when you are that much of a towering intellect, who do you actually trust to hold the red pen?
That's a great question, and the answer gives us a fascinating look into the literary ecosystem of that era. The book details this really profound correspondence between Iqbal and a veteran poet named Shad Abedi.
And for some context here, at the time of this correspondence, Iqbal was not some struggling amateur.
Not at all.
He was already achieving massive popularity. He was an intellectual giant in his own right, yet he would voluntarily send his works to Shad for a process called Islah.
Right, Islah, which translates to correction or reform. But in the context of Urdu poetry, it is so much more profound than simple proofreading.
Yeah, I was trying to map this onto a modern scenario to wrap my head around it. It's almost like a modern tech billionaire, someone who's software architects who runs half the global economy, quietly emailing their code to an old retired engineer and asking, hey, can you check my logic here?
That's a brilliant analogy.
It just requires a staggering lack of ego. But what is Shad actually doing during this Isla process? It's not just fixing typos.
To understand the mechanics of Islah, we have to look at the Ustad Shagird, or master-apprentice tradition. Iqbal was sending Shad his work primarily in the form of ghazals.
Right, the ghazal.
And a ghazal is a highly structured, intricately rhyming Arabic or Persian poetic form. It usually explores the agonizing beauty of love alongside the pain of loss. But in Iqbal's hands, it was often a vehicle for heavy philosophical inquiry.
So Shad wasn't just fixing a misplaced comma or, forcing a rhyme to fit.
Far from it. In the Ustad Shagird tradition, the master stress tests the meter and the philosophy simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
Shad might look at a metaphor Iqbal used that felt maybe a bit too rigid, or a word choice that threw off the internal musicality of the verse.
So he's tuning the instrument.
Exactly. He would suggest tweaking a single word, not just for grammar, but to make the entire couplet resonate with centuries of cultural history. The master ensures the structural integrity of the poem can actually hold the sheer weight of the philosophy being poured into it.
That makes the humility even more striking, honestly. I mean, Iqbal knew his message of societal revival was vital, which meant the vehicle carrying that message had to be flawless.
He couldn't afford for it to break down.
Right. He didn't let his massive public stature blind him to the fact that a seasoned master could spot microscopic imperfections in the foundation.
And it highlights a dedication to the craft that supersedes personal glory. He viewed his poetry as an instrument of awakening. If the instrument was out of tune, the society wouldn't wake up.
So submitting to Isla was an act of profound responsibility. Okay, so if Shad was the architect checking the structural integrity of the work, there's another figure in this book who was, checking on the man pouring the concrete.
Yes.
We move from professional literary perfection to the heavy emotional toll that perfection demanded.
You're talking about the correspondence with Taqi Abedi.
Yes, Taqi Abedi. The book dives into these deeply personal letters exchanged between Iqbal and Atiyah, specifically focusing on the time frame around 1909 to 1911. What is the historical context here? Why is this specific window so crucial?
Well, that window represents a period of immense internal friction for him. He had recently returned from studying in Europe. His philosophical worldview was expanding rapidly, and he was grappling with the massive expectations being placed upon his shoulders by his community.
Everyone was looking to him for answers.
Exactly. He was transitioning from being a celebrated poet to a genuine philosophical leader.
And that pressure just bleeds through every word of these letters. It's intense. He lays his inner life completely bare. He doesn't talk about the mechanics of rhyme schemes with Atiyah. He talks about the emotional gravity of his existence.
And very raw.
He frames his artistic ability not just as a divine gift, but as a source of profound sorrow and isolation.
The isolation of the visionary is a huge, recurring theme here. When you are operating on a philosophical plane that is miles above your contemporaries, the air gets very thin.
But I have to be honest, reading about that level of despair made me pause. because we're so conditioned to picture him as unshakable. Do these letters, full of all this self-doubt and sorrow, do they risk making him look fragile? Do they shatter the image of the monumental philosopher?
I would actually argue the exact opposite.
Really?
Yes, they provide the necessary counterbalance to his public persona, the soaring philosophical heights of his published works, that supreme confidence and clarity regarding human potential. Those were anchored in deep private vulnerability.
Wait, are you saying the confidence was a performance?
Not a performance, but a hard-won victory.
Okay, I see.
The letters to Taqi Abedi prove that his public clarity wasn't the result of a mind that never experienced doubt. It was the result of a mind that wrestled violently with his own turmoil and emerged victorious.
Wow.
Sharing that burden with a trusted confidant allowed him to process the sorrow that accompanied his artistic joy. To speak with a voice that can move millions, you first have to survive the echo chamber of your own mind.
That shifts the perspective completely. It means the art itself was earned through fire, which I guess brings us to the actual artifacts that survived that fire. Let's look at the lost art itself, the verses Dr. Abedi managed to resurrect.
The latter half of the book, basically from page 101 onwards, is dedicated entirely to these omitted works, and the sheer volume of material is staggering.
What really stands out to me is the thematic whiplash.
Oh.
You have these very traditional, almost conventional romantic complaints sitting right next to incredibly dense philosophical inquiries, and then these raw, unfiltered reflections on the exhaustion of life. They feel like puzzle pieces that belong to completely different pictures.
Well, that's because they represent him testing different narrative identities. We talked earlier about his grand architectural vision of Kuti, the empowerment of the self.
Right.
Any poem that leaned too far into traditional fatalism or expressed too much despair would actively clash with that public project.
I want to push on the actual quality of these poems, though. For anyone listening trying to wrap their head around this archive, we have to ask, are these omitted ghazals actually top-tier, masterpiece-level poetry? Or are they just historical artifacts for hardcore scholars?
That's the big question.
Because if a genius left them on the cutting room floor, isn't it highly probable they just aren't very good?
It requires a nuanced evaluation, I think.
Yeah.
Are all of them the equal of his greatest canonical masterworks? No.
Okay, so he was right to cut some of them.
Sure. Some of them are clearly raw. Some represent transitional phases in his writing where he is trying to bridge two distinct philosophical concepts, say, the traditional Persian mysticism with modern political action, and he hasn't quite nailed the synthesis.
So they are conceptually messy.
They're experiments, but within that messiness, there are undeniable flashes of unpolished brilliance. They are vital because they show him pushing against the constraints of form to see how much heavy philosophy a traditional ghazal could actually hold before the structure broke.
But for someone who isn't a literary scholar, what is the value of reading a break and experiment?
I like to think of it like this. These rough drafts are like the scaffolding around a skyscraper. They aren't meant to be lived in. They might look chaotic compared to the sleek glass of the finished building. But you couldn't have built the soaring philosophical heights of his published works without that scaffolding.
I love that image.
And looking at the scaffolding tells you exactly how the building was engineered.
And sometimes the scaffolding is where the actual sweat and blood is visible, because the final published product has to be perfectly polished and ideologically sound, but the rough draft just has to be honest.
The honesty is the absolute draw here. In these omitted works, you see the man behind the monument trying to figure out what he actually believes before he decides what he wants to teach.
Man, that's powerful. We started this deep dive looking at a solitary figure on a book cover, a genius isolated in his thoughts, surrounded by scattered, disconnected papers. It felt like a visual representation of a chaotic, hidden mind.
But through Dr. Taqi Abedi's meticulous, decades-long compilation, those disconnected papers form a coherent, deeply human narrative.
They really do. We ventured into a vibrant, vulnerable world that the public was never really meant to see. We explored the mechanics of his unsent drafts, the profound humility required to submit to a mentor like Taqi Abedi, and that raw emotional honesty he poured out to Taqi Abedi when the burden of his own intellect just became too heavy.
Baqiyat Iqbal ultimately proves that the truest measure of an artist isn't just the pristine marble statue they put up on the pedestal.
No, it's not.
The truest measure of their genius and their humanity is often found in the fragments they sweep away.
It's a reminder that greatness is a process of curation, of struggle, and of choosing which parts of yourself to share and which parts to hide. Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over as you step back into your day. Think
Hmm.
about your own digital and physical footprint. If a scholar were to compile your personal Baqiyat, your deleted emails, the text messages you typed out but never sent, your abandoned passion projects, and your rough drafts, what story would that collection tell? Would those discarded fragments reveal a truer, more complex version of you than the polished profile you present to the world?